back Zoom audience. But, you probably received last night my transmission of Judge Eskin's two-page biography. I think you received that.
Yes.
Good. Okay. I remind you that a few years ago we had a judge of the Monterey Superior Court, Andy Liu, daughter, son of Lillian Liu. And in that tradition, we're asking to speak to us today George Eskin, a very distinguished judge and attorney. I'll just tell you a few things about him. As he was the president of his high school class in Maryland, he was also president of the Student Bar Association at UCLA Law, from which he graduated in 1965. And he went on to a very distinguished career, both in private practice of law and public practice of law. He served with distinction in LA County and Ventura County, Santa Barbara County. And finally, Governor Gray Davis had the good sense to appoint him to the bench in 2003. He resigned in 2013, at which time he received the John Rickard Judicial Service Award by the Santa Barbara County Bar Association, but he had already won the Medal of Justice from Ventura County Criminal Defense Bar Association and the Lifetime Achievement Award of the Santa Barbara Criminal Defense Bar Association. So it goes on and on. This is not to mention all his commission work and his volunteer activities with organizations, the board he served, etc. But I just want you to know what a Renaissance kind of man he is, because he has been the public address announcer for the UCSB women's basketball team for the past 28 years. 30. Okay. He has on KCLU and on KDR done jazz programs and hosted classical music. And he's a member of SAG and AFTRA. Personally, he's the father of three, including our Meredith. He is the father of an attorney. He's the grandfather of a current law student at American University. Very, very distinguished man. I think we're going to enjoy what he has to say. I want to turn you over to George Eskin.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here. You folks do a wonderful, wonderful job in introducing the world to the Santa Barbara County Courthouse, and we appreciate it. When I say we, though, I want to be careful because nothing that I say here today, none of the opinions I may express, and I probably will, are representative of the court or any other judge. They're mine, and I am somewhat opinionated about certain subjects, especially when it comes to the criminal law, in which I've been invested in the past 60 plus years. I do have that small claim to fame, at least in this community, a big claim to fame. I am the father of Meredith Free. And Meredith was born in, well, I wasn't going to say that. I paused.
She's probably the youngest one here.
Meredith was born in the second year of my experience at the UCLA Law School. And one of the things I wanted to share with you is that it's been my experience, very satisfying experience to have participated in the criminal law revolution that was ignited in the 1960s when I was in law school. It's been a very significant 60 plus years. In 1961, the year before I entered law school, the Supreme Court decided the case of Matt versus Ohio, MAPP versus Ohio. And that was significant because the Supreme Court decided that in the enforcement of the Fourth Amendment's protection against unlawful search and seizure, the remedy would be the exclusion of evidence that was unlawfully seized. And that was a remarkable turn in the history and progression of the criminal law. While I was in law school in 1963, the year before Mary was born, the Supreme Court decided the case of Gideon versus Wainwright. And that case was extraordinarily important in terms of providing legal representation to people who couldn't otherwise afford it. In 1963, for example, there was no such thing as a public defender in Santa Barbara County or in Ventura County, where I started my professional career. In 1965, the year that I graduated, the California legislature passed and the governor signed a bill as creating the California Evidence Code. And that was the first time in California that we departed from this traditional evidence laws and statutes, not statutes, laws that had been passed down over the centuries. And then, of course, in 1966, the year I started practicing in Ventura as a deputy district attorney, the Supreme Court decided the case of Miranda versus Arizona. And you've all heard of was the defendant given his or her Miranda rights, which are necessary under the current procedure before any statement that the defendant would make while in custody would be admissible in evidence. So following my graduation from law school in 1965, I commenced my career in the Ventura County District Attorney's Office. That was not my intention to pursue a career in criminal law. I knew that I wanted to include in whatever I did in the practice of law, going to court, probably stemming from my earlier aspirations to pursue a career in the professional theater. I graduated from the UCLA Department of Theater Arts in 1960, went to New York to study acting with a fellow named Lee Strasberg, and discovered shortly thereafter that I really didn't have the talent to pursue a career as an actor. And various things happened, and I went to law school at UCLA. When I arrived in the UCLA, in the Ventura District Attorney's Office, I really intended to go there for a 2-year postgraduate course in trial training. Because when I went to law school, we didn't have such things as clinical programs that exist today, where people can get practical experience in various areas of the law. And I knew that I wanted to get some experience that would enable me to represent clients in court. Well, I was a deputy district attorney in Ventura for 2 years. First year I did misdemeanors, second year I did felonies, and then I started to explore opportunities in private practice. Something strange happened in 1968. To me, the district attorney asked me to become the assistant district attorney because the fellow who was in that position left abruptly to go to the Peace Corps. To the world, at least in the United States, Congress passed the 1968 Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act, and hundreds of millions of dollars came out of Washington to states to reform their criminal systems. And major changes occurred starting in 1968 throughout the United States, and certainly in California. And I happened to be the beneficiary of a fellow who was had been a deputy sheriff, had gone to the FBI school in Washington, Quantico. And he was the chief investigator in the DA's office and a real visionary. His name was Mal King. And as a result of Mal King's leadership in Ventura County, I don't know how many of you are familiar with Ventura, he built the government center on Victoria Avenue. Formerly, when I started out in my career, the district attorney's office was part of what is now City Hall. That was the county administration building. And that's where the courthouse was. And that's where all of the county activities were at 501 Full Street. But because of the Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act, not only did we build the government center, but lots on Victoria, but lots of other things occurred with regard to streamlining the criminal justice process. I just use the term I don't use anymore, criminal justice, which is going to lead me to some opinions that may be offensive to some, certainly be offensive to some of my colleagues. I think criminal justice, which is a common term you hear, is aspirational. But what really occurred is we've inherited what I describe now as a criminal punishment system. We inherited a system that's predicated on the belief that if you threaten people with harsh consequences, they won't engage in criminal conduct. And if you threaten them with harsher punishment, they won't engage in it again. It's turned out to be a completely failed system. And that's why I call it criminal justice as an aspirational. The only thing that involves justice now is that we pursue the criminal punishment system in the court. And through the courts, we do provide what we call due process of law and equal protection of the law. But criminal justice is still something we are striving for and have not yet achieved in a variety of ways. So I went into the private practice of law for 4 years, trying to extricate myself from criminal law and seeing if I could do other things with my legal career. But I found it very difficult because as a result of this Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act of 1968, there were created throughout the state of California regional criminal justice planning boards. And I was a member of both the Ventura Board and the Los Angeles Regional Board. And I continued in that capacity even though I went into private practice. In 1975, 74, the district attorney newly elected in Santa Barbara, a fellow by the name of Stan Roden, contacted me and asked if I would be interested in joining his staff here as a deputy, his assistant district attorney. And I agreed to do that. I had learned that my skills as a trial attorney had some success in civil litigation, but I didn't really enjoy it as much as I did the criminal process. My first exposure to the Santa Barbara courthouse was in 1971. And I can only tell you, those of you who have not been involved since then, in significant changes throughout the system, I'll call it the system, that for much for the better. For example, in 1971, there were no women judges. There were no women prosecutors. And I don't think, as I think back, there were any women in the public defender's office. Stan Roden, when he became district attorney, made a commitment to the hiring of women and people of color. And we were quite successful in doing that. Now on the Superior Court, we have half of our judges are women. We're still pretty weak when it comes to ethnic diversity. We have only one Latino judge, Raimundo Montes de Oca. We've had others. Arturo Garcia retired last year, and Frank Ochoa, of course, served here for almost 30 years in both the municipal court and the Superior Court. So I served in the DA's office here for 1 year, 1975. I was the advisor to the grand jury. And then to some funny circumstances. I was introduced to the city attorney of Los Angeles, a fellow by the name of Bert Hines. He had come to Santa Barbara to promote some statewide legislation. The district attorney was unavailable to show him around, asked me if I would do that. I did it gladly. And 10 days later, he called the district attorney, Mr. Roden, and asked if it would be all right for him to approach me about going to Los Angeles. And he offered me the position of chief assistant city attorney in Los Angeles, a position that I held for 5 years. Was introduced to a very different world than that which we enjoyed here in Santa Barbara and Ventura. So I was there for 5 years as the chief assistant city attorney, and then returned to private practice in Ventura and Santa Barbara in 1981, and remained in that capacity here in private practice until about 1998, when my wife decided to run for the state assembly. She had no prior political experience other than making noises about various issues that she cared greatly about. Brooks Firestone, our assembly member, had decided to run for lieutenant governor, leaving the office vacant, so there was no incumbent. And my wife, Hannibeth Jackson, ran for the assembly, was elected in 1998. I retired from the active practice of law because my other daughter was then entering high school. And so I became a stay-at-home dad and a high school mock trial coach, and got myself involved in a whole bunch of mischief-making activities. In 2003, as Hannibeth was nearing the end of her term limited career in the assembly, which was then 6 years, and my other daughter was leaving high school to go to college, Governor Davis appointed me to the Superior Court. I think he was influenced in part by the fact that his judicial appointment secretary was a fellow named Bert Hines, with whom I've been the chief assistant for 5 years. And so I served 10 years on the Superior Court here in Santa Barbara. It was 1993 that I became the public address announcer for the UCSB women's basketball team. That's something I did for 30 years until this past March. And in 2013, I retired from the Superior Court after 10 years. Between 2013 and today, I served, I know at least one of you has an interest in this, on the Judicial Council's pretrial detention reform work group in 2016 and 2017. And I'm mentioning a lot of this stuff because Bill has indicated that you may have some questions, and I hope you do, because that's really what I'm looking forward to. And I know that he had alerted me that you might have some questions about the security provisions at the courthouse, the use of remote proceedings in court, and perhaps the criminal punishment system. So I can segue into any subject that you'd like me to, and I hope that I'm looking. Sue, hi, how are you?
I'm fine.
I'm also a member of this.
Well, I was going to mention that you gave a marvelous talk when we were studying the British exploration of Africa, and he told us all about Stanley in a marvelous voice, the Stanley that went into Africa, and that is Dr. Livingston, I presume.
Right.
I hope you remember some of that. I never forgot it.
Well, I had no experience with Africa before then, but we're going to Botswana in October.
Well,
And I'm looking forward to that.
good.
So is there anything you would like me specifically to address? Yes, sir.
Thank you. That's fascinating. I have tons of questions, but the first one is, I guess, your opinion. So it sounds like your career dovetailed with a lot of changes happening in the system. was Ventura and then Santa Barbara, would you say it was spearheading this movement, or was it just one county that was experiencing the same changes that were happening anywhere? Or maybe also, how did you end up in Ventura out of all the places that you could have?
How did I get to Ventura?
Yeah, how did you get to Ventura? Was it a special, were they doing something
No.
special?
In the mid-60s, the process was, and I think it continued for at least 10 or 20 years, that the law schools were turning out graduates, and the district attorney's offices, the public law offices, were hiring law school graduates. And in district attorney's offices, they would go for 2 to 3 years. And while they were there looking for opportunities in the local communities, the thing that was not necessarily unique, but what was attractive about Ventura was it was a burgeoning population and growing tremendously. And when I came to Ventura, most of you are familiar with the 101.
That's it.
Oh, when I came to Ventura, I prosecuted the last cattle rustling case in Ventura. You know where it occurred? At the intersection of what is now 101 and the Westlake Boulevard. It was a big. None of the establishments that are there now were there then. There's big fields and pastures and whatnot. Of course, when I came to Santa Barbara, the freeway didn't go through town. It stopped at Chapala and Garden and Santa Barbara and State Street with lights. I mean, I'm sure some of you may remember that. It wasn't, I won't say that that's just what was happening in the 1960s. And of course, I do think that the federal legislation I referred to was inspirational to many jurisdictions. Others that benefited from that opportunity include in California, Santa Clara. Santa Clara County was way ahead of other California counties in so many respects, and has recently, with regard to the topic that is of great interest to me, and that's pretrial detention reform or bail reform. Santa Clara County is the only county in the state that created a Department of Pretrial Services 20 years ago. And now most counties in California, at least those that are trying to make the adjustment, are creating pretrial services functions either out of the court or out of probation, and doing what Santa Clara County did 20 years ago. So the attraction to Ventura for me was what I called a 2-year postgraduate course in trial training. And the district attorney of Ventura County, whose name was Woodruff Dean, Lee Dean, interviewed at UCLA. And I signed up for the interview. And I was smitten with him and the program that he presented. And he asked me, why do you want to be a prosecutor? Well, the traditional answer by most people was, I want to be a career prosecutor. Well, nobody wanted to be a career prosecutor then. They wanted to go establish themselves in the local community, learn how to try a case, how to put on evidence, and then go into private practice. And that was the process at that time, probably between 1962 and 1982. Now we have more deputy district attorneys who are staying for longer periods of time, sometimes for a career. Did I answer your question?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Judge, tell us about your time in the magnificent courthouse we call home. Was your court actually in the courthouse? Which was
Yes.
yours? What's
Well-
what's your favorite memory during that?
My favorite what? People I worked with. Well, I was for 11 and a half years, excuse me, for 9.5 years, I was in a criminal asylum. That's my area of expertise. in 2010, our presiding judge died suddenly. His name was Bill McClatchy. And it left a gaping hole in the lineup. And I had expressed some interest in getting exposure to the civil process. And I asked if I could fill in for Judge McClafferty until a permanent appointment was made. So during that 6-month period, I was in what is now Department 5, or Judge Stern. And in that capacity, I handled probate and civil mental health commitments and family law and other civil proceedings, some civil trials. But it was only for a 6-month period because I learned that Judge Stern had a terminal illness. This is in 2010. And I was told that they didn't expect her to survive 6 months. She's still with us, thank goodness. And, but I knew that she had her heart set on being in that department where Judge McClatchy had lived. And so I went back to criminal, providing her with an opportunity to come to Department 5. She's still there. So I really felt much more comfortable in the criminal law anyway. But I'm really glad that I made that decision for her. I was influenced by wanting her to have that opportunity. Clearly, she's been able to enjoy it for much more than 6 months. But in terms of war stories,
Microphone.
oh, there are people listening. Oh, favorite. Sure, I have favorite moments. I have cases that were very significant. Some of them difficult. Very rewarding. I will tell you this. I did not realize the pressure and stress of the job until I decided to retire. And then I only became aware of it because I felt this tremendous relief. I thoroughly enjoyed the job of judging, and I still do it. I sit on assignment in San Luis Obispo and Santa Maria, Lompoc, here, and Ventura. I'm something about like a substitute teacher. When judges go on vacation or they're ill or there are other vacancies, judges are sometimes asked to sit on assignment by the judicial council. And I've been doing that regularly. As a matter of fact, tomorrow I'll be in the Santa Maria Superior Court, or in the Santa Maria branch. You may have questions about our, do all of you know how many judicial offices are assigned to Santa Barbara County?
No.
Oh, we have 21 judicial offices, judge offices in Santa Barbara County. That's set by the legislature. And the 21 are divided by local decision. Now 11 in Santa Maria and 10 in Santa Barbara. During the time I was on the bench, it was 11 in Santa Barbara and 10 in Santa Maria. But some adjustments have been made based on caseload and other requirements. We currently have, of the 21 judicial offices, we currently have 19 judges. There are 2 vacancies created by retirement, and we're waiting for the governor's office to fill those offices by appointment. Judges are generally commence their career. First of all, you have to have been an attorney for 10 years. And most judges commence their career by being appointed by the governor. And after their appointment, they're required to stand for election within approximately 2 years. And if they are elected or re-elected, they serve a 6-year term. Now, you don't know it, but on every general election ballot, there are judges, except they don't appear because nobody files to run against them. For example, next March 2024, there will be, I think, between 6 and 8 of our current judicial offices that are eligible for being on the ballot. But if nobody files other than the incumbent, it doesn't appear on the ballot. So in 2006, I was appointed in 2003. The first election that I would have been eligible for, my term of office would have been eligible for election, was 2006. So in 2005, I was busy creating an election finance committee and raising money. And nobody filed to run against me, so I returned the money. And that's what happens with judicial elections. Now, occasionally there will be an election for a vacant office. For example, if a judge decides not to run for re-election and retire at the end of his or her term, there will be an election for an open office. And occasionally there's a challenge to a judge who is in office and eligible for election. Somebody will file for that office, but it doesn't happen often. It's happened a few times since 1971. When I go back, by the way, this is kind of an interesting number that you probably won't get anywhere else. Can you guess how many judges have been on the Santa Barbara County Superior Court since I started practicing in 1971? I mean, that's how many years ago is that? 53 years ago?
How many did they start with?
Probably 5 there. Probably 5. I counted. Well, this is from my recollection. From my recollection, I was able to identify 54 people who have served as judges of the Santa Barbara Superior Court since 1971. 54. I mean, that means that judges really don't serve that long ordinarily. I mean, we have one judge who's been on the bench since 1976. That's a long time. And we have another judge who's been on the bench, we have two actually, since 1998. They've been on for 25 years. But ordinarily, judges serve terms of 12, 15 years or less. And in my opinion, that would be a good term limit. Anyway, that goes somewhere else.
Wasn't Judge Lodge the longest standing judge in the state of California, that he was practicing for the longest time?
He
as
was.
a judge? Yes.
He may have been surpassed by Judge Adams.
And Sheila is listening, that Sheila Lodge is
Oh,
on Zoom.
Sheila's
Yeah,
with us?
she-
Yes, Judge, I think Judge Lodge was the longest serving judge. He started in the Justice Court in Isla Vista, moved to the municipal court. You correct me, Sheila, if I'm wrong. And then became a Superior Court judge in 1998 when the courts were consolidated.
Hi, this is Sheila. This is Sheila.
Hi, Sheila.
Hi, good to see you and hear your talk. Yes, Joe died 2 months before he would have been serving for 50 years. He was the longest at the time. He was the longest serving trial court judge in California. However, there was another judge, a woman judge, who was appointed at a time when there were very few women judges, I think by Pat Brown, who served into her, with her boots on and into her 90s. And she was an appeals court judge. I can't remember her name right now.
Sheila, if there's anything else you would like to correct me on, please don't hesitate.
Oh, I'm not really, although Joe did, you know, well, the last years on the bench, he was the preliminary case judge, which and that was all, these were all criminal cases, But I, I heard after he died from a couple of the court reporters that he sometimes, well, he would sometimes bring a case home. And they would have been submitted by the attorneys and asked me what I thought. And I usually would say, you're paid to make these decisions, not me. And so, and I'm not a lawyer. So, but he would sometimes say in the court, now my wife said, that really made me cringe when I found that out. Yeah, no, I'm in no position to critique what you have to say about the law.
Thank you.
I just want to say.
Oh.
Can you repeat Patty Trader's statement for the Zoom people? I'll repeat it. Patty just told the judge that she worked in his office in Ventura in
In the late 60s.
the late 60s. She was probably after school in kindergarten.
It was between 1971 and 75.
Okay, that's a
Yeah. See, the firm started out as Gitterman and Eskin. And then it became Gitterman, Eskin, and Herreras. And then it became Gitterman, Eskin, Schweitzer, and Herreras. And I was never informed as to how Schweitzer displaced Herrera. It's been a curious question in my mind. Mr. Gitterman, who was one of the state's leading workers' compensation specialists, is no longer with us. Mr. Schweitzer resides up near the Mission. Mr. Herreras, I believe, is in Paso Robles or San Luis Obispo.
That's right. So Steve Schweitzer lives here in Santa Barbara?
Yes, near the Mission, very near the Mission, like across the street. Yes, sir.
I'm very naive about the workings of the courthouse. I didn't spend an hour in a courthouse until I became a docent, for some good reason. But you referred to department. What's it, like a courthouse? The courtroom 1, 2 are actually departments, and they're specializing in something.
In Santa Barbara, we call them departments. In San Luis Obispo, they call them departments. In Ventura, they call them courtrooms. It's just local practice.
And they specialize in one thing, like criminal or whatever.
Ordinarily, in the counties in which I'm most familiar, Ventura, Santa Barbara, San Luis Obispo, the courtrooms are designated for certain kinds of cases. There are judges who handle both criminal and civil because they want to be good team players and because they have that interest. For example, Judge Anderley, who is regarded as being assigned to a civil department and does civil litigation, family laws, and that kind of stuff, will not infrequently be assigned a criminal case because criminal cases take priority, especially if the defendant is in custody. But Judge Anderley is somewhat unique in that respect here. In Santa Maria, I think the judges are a little more flexible in terms of what they handle, in terms of civil versus criminal.
Lori?
Give you a full answer to your question. Yes, sir.
Much as I can handle.
I'm sorry. Well, the question has to do with the security conditions at the courthouse. Courthouses, because we have the Figueroa division. See, when I started practicing here in 1975, what is now the Figueroa division was the municipal court. And the municipal court building housed the district attorney's office as well as the court and the courtrooms and the court clerk facilities.
That's had security for a long time.
I'm sorry.
That building has had security for a long time.
Yeah, but it's all recent. It probably, I don't know. When I was on the bench, we didn't have any of the security that presently exists. We didn't have the limited ingress and egress. I mean, that's really something that's evolved as a result of terrible incidents that have occurred elsewhere. I know, Bill, you asked me about the feelings of current court personnel with regard to security, and I can't speak for them. In the crazy times that we live in, and the way people decide to express their feelings about things, I'm personally more comfortable with the fact that we do have the existing security. I think the security at the Figueroa building is superior to this level of security in the courthouse where you serve. But I'm concerned that the judges who are in the Figueroa building have no protection going from their offices or the courtrooms to their cars. They're out in open public lot. At least the judges in the historic courthouse are under ground in the basement. And I don't mean to suggest that the only ones whose security I'm concerned about are the judges. There's some public buildings that are much more secure than others and have limited access, but we have this incredible tension between the Santa Barbara courthouse being such an attraction to tourists and the public. And on the weekends, anybody, I suppose, can get in there. What the sheriff who has responsibility for maintaining security does with regard to the weekend, I don't know. But I think I just have a sense that the court employees are satisfied with the level of security they have. And it's not a matter, I don't think it's a matter of concern. I don't think they come to work worrying about, is there going to be a bomb or something that explode? But I think you'll all agree it's better to be safe than sorry. I'm happy to hear that your concern is there enough security rather than too much? Because I was fearful that maybe some of you were concerned that access to this beautiful building should be made more available.
Well,
I'm also prepared to talk about remote proceedings, if that was another question you had. I'm sorry.
She has a pending question.
Oh. Sorry. Please. Oh, Bill had told me that some of you would like to hear my thoughts about conducting remote proceedings in court.
No.
By Zoom or other platforms. Is that something that interests anybody? No? Okay.
You talked about how influential the trend in criminal law was when you began. And I'd like your reflections on the trends of criminal law now.
Well, I alluded to it when I spoke about the criminal punishment system. I think that's what we inherited, and I explained why I think that. And it's just turned out to be a failure because people, it works with a child when you say, don't touch the toaster. And they touch the toaster and burn their finger and they won't touch the toaster again. And I think that's the basic approach to criminal law. If you do this, bad things are going to happen, and people do them anyway. I don't think people are deterred from engaging in conduct that we describe as criminal because there's a potential consequence. But that's what our system's all about. And so if you do it once, you're punished. If you do it again, you're supposed to be punished more and spend more time in prison. But I think that we've demonstrated that lengthy prison sentences do one thing. There are some people who need to be locked up. There are some people who are either psychopaths or sociopaths or so oriented that they're going to commit crimes no matter what we do to them. And so those people need to be locked up for the safety and security of the public. But there are others who commit crimes as a result of mental illness. There are people who commit crimes as a result of drug addiction. There are people who commit crimes as a result of poverty and homelessness. There are people who commit crimes because they don't have a job and they steal. So we have a public defender in Santa Barbara County now, whose name is Tracy McCougan. And she has created a team of attorneys and social workers and others who provide what she calls holistic defense. And when it was explained to me what holistic defense is, I realized that that's what I practiced when I was a criminal defense attorney 40 years ago. A fellow comes to my office and says, what are my chances of you getting me off? He was charged with drunk driving. And I said, like a percentage? You want a percentage? And I said, yeah. Well, I said, why do you want that? Well, the guy down the street said, I've got a 70% chance of beating the charge, beating the rat. If I say, I'll give you a 90% of the chance of beating the rat, you'll hire me? Yes. Well, I think that illustrates the public perception that the role of the criminal defense attorney is to get people off. If that's the role of the criminal defense attorney, they're complete failures. Because 90% of all people who are charged with crime, whether they're represented by counsel or not, are convicted of something. Why? Because they plead guilty or no contest. 5%, 5 out of every 100 criminal cases goes to trial. 5. The other 95, 5 of them are dismissed and 90 of them plead guilty. These statistics have been constant for the last 60 years, not just in Santa Barbara or Ventura or Los Angeles, but nationwide. You'll see the same statistics, the same numbers. So that really causes you to ask questions. I would say to the client, I'm less concerned with getting you off or beating the rap than finding out why you did what you did that caused you to be arrested. Do you have an alcohol problem? Do you have a drug problem? Do you have some other condition that should be treated so you don't do it again? I mean, the vast majority of people who are prosecuted for drunk driving don't do it again. But that's a lot of people. I mean, it's a traumatic experience to be arrested and put in jail and pay a fine and all the rest. But this notion that we are going to punish people by threatening them with extended periods of incarceration has resulted in us being the largest incarceration country in the world at enormous expense. But most importantly, our recidivism rate is in the 70s and 80%. The recidivism rate for people who are in prison for extended periods of time is 70%. And in countries that have a focus on why is it that you did what you did, what is the root cause of your behavior, and deal with that, the recidivism rate is down to about 20%. So we spend this enormous amount of money locking people up for extended periods of time, and it's just not cost effective, let alone the cost to the public. Is that what you wanted me to address?
Yeah.
Which country gets the best bang for
The
their buck?
Scandinavian countries. And I had the opportunity to go there. I had the opportunity to go to Denmark and Norway, where the focus from the moment a person's arrested is on re-entry, successful re-entries. So a person goes to the Holdow prison, and what do they have? An open prison. They have access to knives. They're taught how to cook, and they come out of prison with jobs waiting for them. It's just, and a lengthy prison sentence there is 3 years. We're sending people to prison for 15, 25, 30 years. Like they're going to get better. They're going to be better able to re-enter and become productive members of society, which should be our goal. Anyway, I do have opinions on that. But I think it's important to acknowledge that there's some people who aren't going to respond, who aren't going to be able to be successfully re-entered. There are some of those, and they need to be locked up for the safety of everyone. And if you don't acknowledge that it's, it's like defund the police. What a terrible concept, defund the police. Reprioritize what police do. Reprioritize and get other people involved in the process than police officers responding to situations that require mental health and public health background and training and approach. Anyway, I'm on my slip. I didn't know I'd go there. Any other questions?
Just one more if there are any, because we're up to the end of the meeting.
Oh, it's noon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Think so. Thank, oh,
Great.
Yes, sir. What is the objective? What is the objective for whatever the judge is going to do? What's the goal?
To make sure that we are follow the law. But the law is written sometimes very poorly and not benefiting society.
I'm not sure. We have a phrase, I think, is there ought to be a law. We see something that is disturbing to us, irritating to us, annoying to us, and we prescribe a law. And to enforce the law, we impose sanctions. If you engage in this behavior, bad things are going to happen to you. And is that going to cause the behavior to stop?
I'm afraid we've been asked to, and our coach turned into a pumpkin.
Oh.
At midnight, at noon. So thank you very much, everyone.
Sure.